Okay, so today I'm going to be doing part 2 of the membership script. If you didn't catch the first video, that's alright. I'm going to go over the registration part, which I did on the last video, and today we're going to do the login using session variables. Alright, so let's get right into it. If you missed the last video, what we did is create a config file to connect to the database. If you don't know, a $sign in PHP defines a variable. So I declare these variables localhost. I usually name my variables something relevant, and that's always going to be localhost. Your database username, your database password, and the actual database. Then you connect to your database and select the database name, and that's all there is to a config file. The other thing we did is we created the registration form and we processed it. So this is the registration form: username, email, first name, last name, and a password. And where we process that is the reg process PHP, where the posted variables were the username, email, last name, and we encrypted the password using MD5, which is a core PHP function. It encrypts it in a 32-bit, I believe, 32 or 64. And then what we did is just insert that data in the database. So you can see that. Here is my tutorials database and the table users. There's my username we created, my email, first name, last name, and the encrypted password I used. So let's get right into doing the login. Alright, I already created these files earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and write the code from scratch. So what we're going to do first is create the login part. To save time, I'm just going to copy and paste in here, maybe. So I just copied and pasted that in there. I wrote that earlier. So when you have two forms on the same page, you got to name them. So I named this one login and that one's registration. I usually put my registration, my login form on the same page. You don't have to. You can use separate pages. I just do it for most of my sites that you'll ever use. And so it's the same as the registration. The method's gonna be post, and the action is gonna be login process.php. So all we need is the username and the password and the submit button. Like I said, I use tables for all my forms just to keep them nice and clean. So we'll go ahead and save that. Alright, so then we have the login process. And we'll go ahead and write that. So what we're going to do first is declare the posted variables. So the first one we're going to do is the username that's posted. Maybe. There it is. So the username, and that's going to equal the posted value of username. If you're wondering where I'm getting that from, that is the name of the input type. So the name on this input type is username, and that's what goes between the brackets, in single quotes too. So then the next thing we're going to do is the password. Now remember, when we registered, we store all the passwords in the database using the MD5 encryption function. So we have to encrypt the password before we check it. So we'll go MD5. Don't forget the parentheses, semicolon, and that's going to be the posted password. And that declares those variables. It just makes it easier to work with queries to check with the database. So the next thing we're going to do is actually run the query. So what we do is we'll find a variable, and that's going to equal a MySQL query. And that's dark blue, so that's a core PHP function. And double quotes, select, and asterisk, which means all. So select all columns from, and my table is users, and where the username, which is the column I named it, if you're wondering where that's coming from, the username column, and now I'm going to use the password column. So where username equals, sorry about that, and where the username equals the variable username. and the password is going to equal the variable password. And the reason I put those in single quotes is so it takes the actual value that was entered. So that actually gets the value. You have to put those in single quotes when you're using double quotes inside the query. So what we're doing is we're selecting all the columns from the users, which is the table where I have it stored, where the username equals the posted username, and the password equals the posted password, which has been encrypted. So now the next thing we're going to do is that's going to return it in an array. Well, we don't want the array. So what we're going to do is MySQL, oops, if I can spell right, MySQL fetch assoc. And that'll break it down for us a little bit easier. And that's going to be of the query. And that'll give us the data to work with for the session variables. Now the next thing we need to do is actually log them in. So here what we do is, if MySQL numRows, maybe, and you see that's dark blue, so that's core PHP function. MySQL numRows of the query. So that means if there are rows, if there is a row where that equals that and that where the username equals username and the password equals password, then we're going to log them in. So after an if statement, you have to have those in parentheses and a bracket and a closing bracket always. So then what we're going to do is set a session. So you always have to start with session start before you declare any session variables, and that's a function, so it needs two parentheses. And then what we're going to do is we're going to declare a session. That's underscore. So session, and you can call this whatever you like to. I'm going to call it username. So session username is going to equal that data, and this is going to be a string username, and I'll explain this a little bit better here. Alright, so what I'm doing is declaring a session to set in the browser. So that's going to log them in, and it's going to set a session in the browser of their username. So the data username of the string is going to equal their actual username. So what this does is this gets the data of the username, and the username right there is just the column. So it's going to set a session for Ryan if it's okay to log me in. And after we do that, we're going to want to redirect them to the members homepage. I already created one, so we'll go use header. I use header location. And colon. And I called mine members.php. But, so what it's going to do is it's going to log them in if it has a row where everything equals. If it has a row, it's going to go ahead and log them in and set a session. Sessions are very useful for membership scripts. It helps you call data in various different ways out of the database. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and set the session equal to the username, and then we're going to redirect them to the members page. Now, if it's not successful, we're just going to redirect them back to the home page. Now, there's some validation you can stick in here and some other stuff. I'm just going to keep it fairly simple for today. And that's going to be members, no, not members, index.php on this one. Then we'll go ahead and save this. Okay. If you ever have any questions about anything, go ahead and leave a comment on my blog or leave a comment right below. But, yep. So we're going to go ahead and check that and try to log in. So I already had mine yesterday with the username of Ryan, and I used a password of 123456. So we'll go ahead and try to log in. Like I said, I'm using XAMPP, which is localhost. There's a various different ones, XAMPP, WAMP, and MAMP. MAMP is for Maxhome. So we'll go Ryan 123456, and we'll see if it works. Maybe I missed something somewhere. Yeah, so I missed a very important part. I forgot to include the config file to connect to the database. That's something you never want to forget. That was an accident. So make sure you always include your config file, otherwise you'll get these funny looking errors right here. So we'll go ahead and refresh the page. And there we go. You have successfully logged into the members area. And that is my members PHP, which is right here. And I just echoed, you have successfully logged into the members area. Yes, always remember the config PHP. I forgot that, but that's why all those errors came up. Now another thing you can do is create a logout using sessions. So we'll just go ahead and create a new file. And what you do here when you're using sessions is, I'm going to go ahead and delete all that, I don't really need it. It's just session destroy. And that's a function, and that will log them out. So we'll just go ahead and call this save as. Logout.php. Well, maybe. So we got that saved as logout.php. So what we want to do is check to make sure that if I put in the wrong password or wrong username, it won't log me in. So we're going to go ahead and log out. And what that means is I forgot to put in session start, which you always have to do. So go to session start. And it's showing me an error. There isn't one, no. So you have to always open, when you're using sessions, you always have to start with session start. So we'll go ahead and refresh the page. And there it is. It logged me out. So we'll go back, and I'm going to use a password of test. And we'll try to log in that way and see if it lets me. And it does not. It redirected back to the index.php, which is exactly where we told it to go if login was not successful. So there you go. Now, another thing you might want to do, and this is just using a membership script, is when you're doing this, we'll go ahead and open up the members PHP, is to keep people out from directly going there. Is another thing you want to do is make sure the session is set before they can access that page. So what I do is now the exclamation mark means is not, so that means if it is not set, and that is a session username, this thing just really does not like it. Session username, then we're gonna want to redirect them back to the home page. So then we'll go header location, and don't forget the colon, index.php. This keeps all your members area, misspelled that. This keeps your members area protected from people trying to get in that have not logged in or are not registered from getting to your protected pages. So this will protect the page for you. That looks to be all the time we have today. We did the logout, covered the logging in. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Leave a comment on my blog, ryancon.com. The link is over there in the sidebar. Thank you for watching, and like I said, if you want to show your support, go ahead and subscribe to my channel or to my blog. Alright, thank you.